Hello, and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your host today. And all week long, we have been talking about NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And I'm so excited to have with me today the Canadian Consulate General in Denver, Stephane Lessard, and the Mexican Consulate General in Denver, Rendon Talavera. And welcome, you guys. This has been an exciting journey so far. I've learned a lot about NAFTA this week and the importance of it. So I'm going to let you guys take it from here. Why is it so important?
Okay. Thank you so much for hosting us. This is, of course, a very important issue for Mexico, as well as it is for Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
NAFTA has been in force for a little more than 20 years, and it has had benefits for the three countries. But I would like to start just by mentioning that in 1893, the Consulate of Mexico was established in Denver. This year we are celebrating our 125th anniversary, and it started because what now is the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, at the time the Chamber of Trade and Railroads and Mines, something like that, requested President Porfirio Diaz to appoint a consul of Mexico in Denver to promote trade, to promote cooperation in business. So we are talking about the same exact issues of 125 years ago.
Wow.
So I just wanted to mention this to give the context of what the importance of NAFTA and trade in general it is.
Exactly. Yeah. Trade's a huge entity, right? We need trade. We thrive on trade. But to know that 125 years ago was when we first got a consulate in Colorado. Yeah. That's amazing, right?
Yeah, it was 17 years after Colorado became a state. And actually the Chamber of Commerce is celebrating now 150 years of it was established. So it's all related.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the time.
Exactly.
It's the same issues. At that time, the railroads started to connect our countries.
Yeah.
And that's why Denver wanted to have a consulate of Mexico here, because there was potential already.
Oh, my goodness. So how long have we had a Canadian consulate in Denver?
Well, Alex, I believe it's hard to compete with 125 years.
It is.
In the case of Canada, it's about 15 years. So we're relative newcomers to the scene. We're busy every day, of course, with our team in downtown Denver, trying to grow the relationship, economic and otherwise, between Canada and Colorado. And maybe to answer your question on trade, in 2016, which are the latest numbers that we had for official trade statistics, trade between Canada and the United States was broadly, the U.S. Generally, was $634 billion and change.
Wow.
So that's $2 billion a day. That's all trade, goods and services. In the case of Colorado, that figure is $4.1 billion between Canada and Colorado in two-way trade. That trade is mostly in the sectors of agriculture, energy, in chemicals and machinery and equipment. And that trade and investment with Canada supports 141,000 jobs in Colorado, and the figure is 9 million jobs across the U.S. So I know Mexican trade with Colorado and the U.S. has similar numbers.
Yeah.
This is good for our countries, Canada, Mexico, but it's also very important for Colorado and the broader United States. It's real jobs in real communities, real people, including some employed directly by Canadian companies established here, and some employed by American companies that create products and services to sell to NAFTA partner countries.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Even though you are a younger consulate, you have a bigger trade between Colorado and Canada. But in the case of Mexico, we have a trade of $2.6 billion a year, according to the data of 2016.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Colorado exports around $1 billion in goods to Mexico. Mexico is Colorado's second largest export market, especially in meat products.
Okay.
We are importing from Colorado around $208 million. Wow. And the exports of fabricated metal products, more manufactured products, is about $153 million. And there's around 88,000 jobs in Colorado that depend on NAFTA. Or trade with Mexico, mostly.
Those are huge numbers. You can't overlook those numbers, right? Those speak for themselves. Those are simply facts.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's true in terms of the importance of NAFTA and trade to all our countries has been mentioned, but the reverse is also true. If we didn't have NAFTA, and I want to be clear, I think we're all very optimistic that we will find a positive agreement, to modernize NAFTA. But, if we didn't succeed, and if we didn't have NAFTA, there will be real consequences. And I'm not going to lie, it would be bad for Canada. Thousands of jobs would be at stake, dozens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs maybe, but it would be bad in the U.S. We have estimates of over 1 million jobs in the U.S., 1.4 million that could be jeopardized. And in Colorado, our estimates are that 34 to 70,000, there's a range there. These are simulations, but 34 to 70,000 jobs in Colorado could be jeopardized if NAFTA went away. So really, it's in our interest to make sure that we succeed in modernizing NAFTA and bring it into the 21st century, but not jeopardize the gains of the past. Just make it better and continue trading and for our shared prosperity.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. Because besides just trade, there's investments going on between our three countries. People don't think about Mexico investing in different countries, but we have investments in Colorado. We have Mexican companies that have established here on the cement sector. We have the Cementos Chihuahua. We have Bimbo, which has a plant for bread and other products, food products. And more and more, we have small businesses also investing in Colorado. For instance, in the mountains, the real estate sector doesn't have to do anything with NAFTA, but it's because we have become more integrated, and there's capital flows, there's workers coming and going.
Right.
We have many U.S. citizens and Canadian citizens working in Mexico, as well as we have them here or in Canada. So our countries are really integrated in that, and as Stephane mentions, we need to just modernize the agreement and include other sectors that were not present back in 1990, in the 90s. We didn't have energy, we didn't have e-commerce, we didn't have other services because the circumstances at that time were different than 25 years after.
Yes.
And maybe I could just pick up on the point that Berenice just made. It's really important, I think, especially under NAFTA, trade started centuries ago between us. It used to be, with Canada, it was trading furs and fur pelts and I don't know what else, I don't know what it was, but trade started a long time ago. But under NAFTA, something changed. First, we expanded trade greatly. Trade between the three partner countries tripled in the 25 years since NAFTA was put into place in 1993. But also, we've changed the way we make things. Because of what Berenice said about the integrated nature of manufacturing now, and even services, our businesses, this is not government doing this. NAFTA just laid down the rules for businesses to do their thing. But they started to deal differently, not just buying and selling from each other, but actually making things together. Some businesses established presence in all three countries, or two of the three, but also some businesses in Canada decided to not necessarily make things themselves, but they decided to procure or buy parts from America, maybe Colorado for sure, or Mexico, and they decided that their supply chain would integrate contributions from other suppliers in elsewhere in the NAFTA countries, and the same is true in Mexico, and the same is true in America. For example, we have a hamburger made in sold in Colorado. There are great burger places in Denver. We've tried most of them, but the beef would be maybe from cattle raised born and raised maybe in Alberta, and shipped down to Colorado for processing, and that's where the meat comes from, and perhaps the flour to make the bun comes from Kansas, or maybe it comes from Saskatchewan, and condiments may come from Mexico, to make a single product. So that's the vision, is together we make great things, and we sell them to each other increasingly, but we outcompete the rest of the world. And that's the vision I'd like to propose, is we don't look at NAFTA countries as one against the other.
Right.
We think absolutely that trade can be win-win-win. Why else would we be at the table if only one country was to win and the others were signing on the dotted line to lose out of the deal? It makes no sense. We can win-win-win because we have done that over the lifetime of NAFTA, and we can continue to be an economic powerhouse that outcompetes the rest of the world. If we go back on these gains, if we erect barriers between us, we jeopardize that competitiveness. And again, this would have dramatic consequences for real communities, real families in all three of our countries.
Yes, and I'd like to add that the world is different from 25 years ago.
Absolutely.
The European Union has evolved in a much bigger entity and we have to compete with them, as Stephane was mentioning. But also the Asia-Pacific countries are forming other groups. We have now what used to be the TTP, and now has been signed to different entity because the United States decided to leave that negotiations. So we have to confront new issues, new circumstances in the world. And what we need to make is our region, North America, more competitive, to offer more jobs or better quality of jobs to our citizens. And in that case, for Mexico, NAFTA has been very beneficial because it modernized our economy. When we negotiated NAFTA, even 2 or 3 years before, we weren't members even of the GATT. You remember GATT, that became the WTO now.
Yeah.
But Mexico was a very closed economy, and we just have our own industries, and we didn't sell anything to any other country, or we didn't import many things.
Yeah.
So our economy was kind of closed, and at the same time, our production and manufacturers were kind of old-fashioned, to say the least. But NAFTA revitalized our economy, and we have now a very strong manufacturing plant in Mexico. We before depended too much on income from the oil industry. The Pemex, our main institution for producing oil and energy, the energy sector. And now we have diversified a lot. Thanks to NAFTA, we started to negotiate other agreements also. So we became a very open economy. So
that's awesome.
Mexico has transformed itself also because of NAFTA. So it's beneficial also to the United States because we share other interests and we negotiate other issues.
Yeah, I love that. I do have a question here for you. I was reading today that Trump is sort of threatening this bilateral trade, right? Only having an agreement with Canada and only having an agreement with Mexico. What are your thoughts on that? I think that's a terrible idea. I think this trilateral agreement is first of all, we're the only continent that has that, right?
The region, yes.
Yes, yeah.
3 main countries, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll maybe just start it. Before NAFTA in 1993, with Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. There was a Canada-U.S. free trade agreement concluded in the 1980s between President Reagan and our Prime Minister Mulroney at the time. And in fact, the proposal was made to add Mexico to the partnership, and I think this was, of course, agreed to, and it's worked out really well. In our view, the negotiations on NAFTA have to remain trilateral, because it goes back to that basic vision of North American forces joining up to be the best in the world. And do you realize that we have in North America 7% of the global population, but 28% of global GDP, global production? So that's an economic powerhouse if I ever saw one.
Yeah.
And together we are stronger, so we believe that the negotiations must remain trilateral.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the same position that Mexico shares with Canada, and we are teaming up to keep the trilateral negotiations, trilateral approach to all the issues relating trade. Because it will not beneficial to be in bilateral agreements, just the U.S.-Mexico or the U.S.-Canada. No, so that we will keep asking and requesting and demanding trilateral negotiations. I think that's a point what we are coinciding very well.
And I would say that's not just that one big reason for that is also for businesses. Yeah. If you have different sets of rules, our businesses have learned to work together. We have Canadian companies like Magna Auto Parts, one of the biggest auto parts manufacturers in the world, and they have employees in Canada, about 20,000. They have employees in Mexico, I think about 22,000, but they have 60,000+ employees in the U.S. And those auto parts, they cross the border, Canada, U.S. and U.S. Mexico, 6 or 7 times before they end up in a truck. You can't have rules that are different. It would disrupt the business that our companies are trying to make. And to stay competitive, they just need to harmonize as many of these rules as possible.
Absolutely.
Yes, and just to give some numbers comparing what Stephane has said, first of all, we have the element of certainty.
Right.
We knew what was going to happen every time we trade. So right now, this could bring an element of uncertainty, that we don't know the rules or that we don't know if they're going to change soon. But NAFTA have created a market of 480 million people with a GDP, as Stephane was mentioning, of $20 trillion. And the annual goods that we trade in between the 3 countries is around $1 trillion, and 5 million U.S. jobs depend on NAFTA. So those are the big numbers that underline what NAFTA means to the 3 countries.
Those are huge numbers.
Exactly.
We're in the trillions.
Yes.
That's huge, for sure. We are here today talking NAFTA with the Canadian Consulate General Stephane Lessard and the Mexican Consulate General Rendon Talavera. Excuse me so much. I'm so sorry. And both of you are based here in Denver, and I love your outlook on Colorado and NAFTA specifically, right? These numbers do translate across America, though, yeah?
Of course, yes. The figures we mentioned earlier, $4.1 billion in trade between Canada and Colorado. That figure is 634 billion, in two-way trade in 2016. That's $2 billion a day, and just between Canada and the U.S., the figures are comparably high in respect to Mexico as well. We're talking about 9 million jobs in the U.S. that depend on trade and investment with Canada. There are over 5,500 Canadian businesses that have set up a presence in America, and dozens of them in Colorado. So it's real businesses doing real production and manufacturing of great products or services that get sold to real people around the world, and that creates jobs right here and also, of course, in our countries.
Yes, and a lot of people depend on that, on their well-being. For instance, it also has an effect on immigration. Right now, we have less Mexican immigration to the United States because we have developed our economy. We have more jobs, better jobs in Mexico, and all our production chains are related because there's people working on that. So it will affect a lot of people if someone decides to end NAFTA. So we are talking about also human beings being affected.
Right. Well, and we're talking about economies, right?
Yes.
You can't deny the fact that each economy, Canadian, Mexican, and the U.S., we all have better economies simply because of this trade agreement. Are there any specific points that you want to drive on this, and what would your message be to Mr. Trump if he were with us today? What would you like? Keep it rated G, but
yeah. No, it's that NAFTA has been beneficial, and there's just the need to modernize it, to bring it to the 21st century, to include other sectors that were not contemplated before, and it will be beneficial for everyone, a win-win-win situation, as Stephane mentioned also, because if not, we all three have a lot to lose.
Absolutely.
I could completely agree. I would say that it's imperative that we conclude these negotiations as best as we can and as soon as we can. I would just add that the ambiguity around the conclusion of the negotiations has an impact on trade and investment. Investment in particular, I know that right now there are Canadian investors that were looking at making some rather large decisions to invest in America, and they're not sure that NAFTA will be in place. So those decisions have been put on the side of the table just until certainty is present, and I know that's true American investors in Canada or maybe in Mexico. So I think that our businesses and our great people that produce things, we need certainty, we need a conclusion. But I would say also that from the point of view of Canada, we want a good deal. We just don't want any deal. And it has to be beneficial for all countries. We can do this so that we all win. But Canada will not accept any deal, and we're prepared to stay at the table as long as it takes to get a good deal that works for all the countries.
I think that's lovely.
Yes, and it has also the uncertainty, the effect on, for instance, on the Mexican economy. Our currency devalues each time there's some element of uncertainty. So in Mexico, every tweet is taken with very, very, very carefully, because the peso market, our currency, goes up and down, and that affects our purchasing power, and it has an effect on many things. So we really need that certainty, and we agree with Canada that we don't want just any deal. We have to have a very modern, beneficial for everyone agreement.
Well, I certainly hope we get there. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to be joined by Tracee Bentley, and she is with the Colorado Petroleum Council. She's going to speak specifically to the energy sector and how that's affected by NAFTA. And I do need to quickly mention that the reason that we are talking NAFTA this week is because of a coalition that Jeff Wasden and Karen Gerwitz came up with, and that's the president of the Colorado Business Roundtable and the president of World Trade Center Denver. It's Colorado Business Leaders for NAFTA. Check them out on Twitter. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Back to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins with Colorado Business Roundtable and your host today on Connect and Collaborate. And so we've been talking NAFTA all week. Right, and today in studio we have Stephane Lessard, the Canadian Consulate General, and Rendon, Talavera, the Mexican Consulate General, both here in Denver. And we were talking the importance of NAFTA, and we talked about why the jobs that could be lost, the revenue that could be lost. But I'm going to turn this to you, Rendon, and what priorities do you have for this renegotiation of NAFTA, right? If we don't want to keep it the same, we're looking to renegotiate.
Yes, of course. And as we mentioned, the renegotiation of NAFTA is a great opportunity to renew for Mexico the strategic trade that we have in North America with the United States and with Canada, which is the biggest free trade agreement in the world, and also to take advantage of the 21st century economy. There has been changes, and we need to have a favorable environment to upgrade trade rules and the framework of NAFTA, inclusion of new trade disciplines, digital trade, energy, and, for instance, the communication sectors. In Mexico, we have different structural reforms during the present administration of President Peña Nieto, especially on telecommunications and energy and other matters. So for Mexico, it's very important to incorporate these sectors into NAFTA. Mexico has been acting in good faith in a constructive and serious manner, always favoring our national interest, while we are searching for a beneficial relation for the three countries. We also have established our priorities and trade objectives, which are strengthening North America's competitiveness, to promote an inclusive regional trade, and to provide certainty that we were talking about before to both trade and investments. And we are willing also to negotiate the treaty only if it will translate into tangible benefits for our society and our economy.
Wonderful. And Stephane, what would you like to prioritize?
So again, very much similar perspective, I think, than Berenice mentioned. We are very much motivated with that vision of North America getting stronger, because through more integrated supply chains and businesses working together, we can create more prosperity in North America. And some of the ideas we have for modernizing NAFTA include cutting red tape, where making it easier for businesses to work together, and harmonizing regulations, for example, for cross-border trade. We want to make it easier for business professionals to set up companies and move across the borders, so that they can create more prosperity, And also we have some ideas for making trade a little bit more inclusive, more progressive. We have some ideas, for example, for a chapter on indigenous rights, making sure that we create more opportunities for our indigenous peoples, or also in a chapter on women and gender, creating more opportunities for the women of our countries to create new companies and engage in trade, create jobs, and contribute to prosperity. We want to achieve stronger labor standards, stronger environmental standards in all three countries. And through that, I think we can make trade, and that's a guiding vision for Canada, is making sure that trade benefits not just the people at the top of the economic food chain, not just the 1%, but the workers in the middle class and the people trying to join the middle class.
Wonderful. Well, and we keep mentioning different sectors have grown, right, in the last 20, 25 years. And one of those sectors is energy, right? Yes. You mentioned specifically that you've grown tremendously in Mexico with the oil and gas industry. And we have a guest with us by phone that is Tracee Bentley is joining us today. Tracee is with the Colorado Petroleum Council. How are you, Tracee?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So you've heard about NAFTA? Let's hear your perspective on why NAFTA is so important in the energy industry for you.
Sure. Well, the Colorado Petroleum Council, which is a division of the American Petroleum Institute, API has made no bones about our very strong support for NAFTA. The North American Free Trade Agreement has played an absolute critical role in supporting and growing North American energy integration, in interdependence, and energy security, by eliminating tariffs for crude oil, gasoline, jet fuel, and other refined products, and for energy-intensive manufactured goods. NAFTA has also liberalized energy trade, provided investment protection, and served as the foundation for recent access to Mexico's hydrocarbon reserves. Just in a nutshell, a few of the many things that NAFTA does for us, it supports jobs. 10.3 million U.S. natural gas and oil industry jobs, for example. Number two, it really benefits the consumers. Our integrated energy market is more efficient than separate markets, resulting in more affordable energy for consumers in all three countries, we would argue. And number three, it certainly strengthens our security. I'm sure the experts have spoken about this, but North America is nearing energy self-sufficiency. And so, of course, it strengthens our North American security if we have to maintain that integration, I would argue. And finally, it helps open markets. The U.S. Direct oil and natural gas investments in Canada totaled $4.5 billion in 2015 for extraction and $8.5 billion in petroleum refining. Free and integrated energy markets, easing restrictions on foreign investment have solidified in Canada, and there's the potential for the same investment in Mexico. So for those reasons and many more, we absolutely support NAFTA.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracee. So let's run this conversation. What are your thoughts on energy? You want to start us off, Rendon?
Yeah, okay. As I mentioned, Mexico has gone through a reform on the energy sector, and we have had more and more investment on this petroleum and gas extraction. And for instance, Mexico is the second largest energy trading partner of the United States, totaling $39 billion US in trade in 2016. What we trade is natural gas, petroleum, and 90% of Mexico's natural gas imports from the United States, and 80% of all the gasoline in Mexico comes from the United States. So the market, Mexico-US on the energy sector is huge.
Yeah.
And of course, the investments have been growing and growing since we opened the sector to foreign investments. Before we couldn't do it, because we have a law in Mexico that it was only for the Mexican investments and the Mexican institution, which is Pemex, but we rely too much on the oil sector for revenue. And since NAFTA, for instance, we open the market for any other products, and we depend now more on the petroleum exports, but we are getting investments on the sector because of we open the market.
Interesting.
The sector. Yes.
Wonderful. And how about Canada?
Well, Canada is the #1 supplier of all forms of energy to America. That's perhaps not so well known. There are other countries that may come to mind, but whether it's hydroelectricity, mostly in the northeast of our countries, or whether it's crude oil, Canada is the #1 supplier of crude oil specifically to America. And I think it goes back to what Tracee was saying, the issue of it's prosperity, but it can be security, national security. Again, we're stronger together from that perspective as well. And, America is doing incredible with the shale revolution to increase its national production of natural gas and oil and so on. But there's still going to be a while where America needs to import oil products or other forms of energy. And would it rather import from less secure, less stable countries elsewhere in the world, or even nearby, perhaps Venezuela or other countries, or perhaps just focus on the North American region and work with its NAFTA partners so that we all can work together to ensure our energy needs. The energy that we provide to America powers your economy. It creates jobs. As Tracee was saying, it's also making products energy efficient and also affordable for American consumers. And I think sometimes in trade we tend to forget the perspective of the consumer, that we're talking about energy or we're talking about goods. You go to Walmart. That's all of our families will go to Walmart or similar places, and those places, they offer products from North America, but also around the world at affordable prices, and the consumer benefits from that. Higher tariffs, whether it's steel or aluminum, or higher tariffs on any kind of product, will hike prices for consumers, and that will be bad for them, but also the general economy. So I think we have much more to in energy and beyond, much more to do by staying together and working it out, and then outcompeting the rest of the world.
Yes, agreed. So, excuse me, Tracee. So Colorado Petroleum Council, how directly affected would your company be in a renegotiation? What is your goal for that renegotiation of NAFTA?
Oh, sure. Well, my companies would be directly affected. I mean, we're talking about, some of the largest oil and gas producers in the world. And so this is absolutely one of our top priorities. So one of our goals, honestly, and it has been for a long time, is to make NAFTA permanent. This constant, negotiation and sunset clauses and, are we going to do that? That's not helpful in providing energy certainty, as was just described, to North America. And so we want some permanency there that will really continue to help our energy independence and our security. I'd also like to mention, and it was kind of alluded to earlier by the gentleman from Canada, but the trade in North America is multi-directional, and we think that's a very healthy and necessary situation. The trade in crude oil, natural gas, refined products, gasoline, petrochemicals, and electricity, all of those between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico are multi-directional. So the U.S. is a net importer of natural gas from Canada, and the U.S. is a net exporter of natural gas to Mexico. So that's just one example of how integrated we are. And our countries have done very well for many years figuring out our energy needs and how to make sure that we're integrated. So to upset what we already know is working, what's good for the consumer, good for all three of our economies, just doesn't make any sense to us.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. Thoughts there?
No, it just makes sense. Absolutely. I think what's a big new development, I would say a game changer, I think, is the Mexican constitutional reforms, Berenice, the opening up of the Pemex monopoly that you had, and I think that's been a game changer. It's opened up opportunities for American companies, of course, for Canadian companies. We remain an open energy market. There's huge investments in the oil sands from Canadian companies, but companies from other countries. So I think, in energy in particular, we need to further integrate. There's opportunities to, if you look at the map of our continent, North America, and you see the infrastructure in place, how the grids, the electricity grids, how they interoperate, how the pipeline infrastructure, the built infrastructure for pipelines for natural gas and oil, how very much north-south integrated it is. You see that we have everything in place to continue to safely, effectively, and securely supply our own energy needs. And then that allows the U.S. and some of us to export also to the rest of the world, and that creates more prosperity in North America.
Yes, and even before our opening the sector in Mexico, we exported much of our oil to the United States, and we received them back in refined products because we have a lack of refineries in Mexico.
Okay.
That's why most of our gasoline, 80% of our gasoline that we used in Mexico is imported from the United States. So we export the oil, but we get back refined products. And regarding the opening of the sector, we have had already 7 rounds of licitations in Mexico for new contracts for exploration and exploitation of crude oil. And it has been very successful. So far we have had different countries participating in the market in Mexico. 17% of it is from North America, Canada, and the United States. 49% is projects that go to Mexico, Mexican companies, and only 7% of South America, which is only Argentina and Colombia. So the concentration, besides the companies in Mexico, Mexican companies working on the sector now, almost 18% has been adjudicated to North American companies. So the potential of this energy sector in Mexico is just opening. It's been only 2-3 years that this started after the constitutional reforms and all reforms that we have had in Mexico. So it's really it has an impact already in North America. So for Colorado companies, there's a huge market there for trade, investments, and also the creation of renewable energies, which in Mexico we are not as advanced as Canada is on these issues, but that's a start, and that's where we can keep growing and progressing to benefits of to be beneficial for the 3 countries and our population.
Wonderful.
Maybe I can just add that vision of an integrated energy market, producers and purchasers, all of us buying and selling to and from each other. I think that I'm happy that it was recognized by our negotiators at the negotiating table on NAFTA. Last week it was announced, I believe, that there will be an energy chapter in NAFTA, and I think that wasn't so certain at the beginning, and now we have an opportunity to really enshrine and make permanent a lot of this opening of our respective markets to each other to make ourselves stronger.
Fantastic. Tracee, any thoughts on this energy chapter in NAFTA?
I completely support everything that's been said. As I said before, it's API's one of our absolute top priorities. When it comes to our energy security, which we've been talking a lot about, but I think it was the gentleman from Canada who said we don't talk about the security benefits as often as we should. We certainly don't talk about the benefits to consumers. But along the lines of energy security, all this integration that we've been talking about, the North American integrated energy supply, in addition to all the benefits we've listed, it really, North America would be subjected less than, I would argue, many other reasons when it comes to supply disruptions as well. Right, and that's certainly an energy security issue. So the more integrated we are, the less disruptions we're going to see in our energy flow. And I think for all 3 countries, that is certainly a form of security.
Lovely. And just to, if you're just tuning in right now with us, our audience, I want to let everyone know that the reason that we're talking NAFTA this week on Connect and Collaborate is because Jeff Wasden and Karen Gerwitz got together, and that's Jeff Wasden, the president of the Colorado Business Roundtable, and Karen Gerwitz, the president of World Trade Center Denver. They knew that this need for a NAFTA renegotiation was pertinent, right? It's very necessary. And so they got together and they formed a group called Colorado Business Leaders for NAFTA. And so they have been meeting. They set up these shows for us, actually, and so they are the reason that we have you guys here and with us on the show. So thank you for joining us because of that. But just any thoughts that anything that sticks out to you guys that you really feel like needs done today?
I will start. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please, Tracee, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. Well, to me, hopefully listeners now have a better understanding of just how important the North American Free Trade Agreement is for all the reasons that were explained today. And, our folks in Washington need to hear this. And so if there's listeners out there who say, my goodness, this is such a no-brainer, why aren't we in a position to support? I would urge them to call their elected officials and to let it be known that as a consumer, that they are, that they would like to see NAFTA, first of all, remain, and number 2, remain with stability. That would be my ask.
I like that.
Maybe I can just flag the importance of what Tracee was just saying. I think NAFTA has been taken for granted quite a bit. It's 25 years old. Many people never knew anything before. And, we go to buy goods and for the house or whatever. And or we buy energy and we don't know necessarily where it comes from, but we like it to be affordable and available. And I think NAFTA has a role to play, it's not the entire economy, but it's a major part of what has made us more prosperous and created a number of jobs. I think we've taken it for granted, and I know in the last election in America, trade generally and trade agreements, and NAFTA in particular, has been vilified as the culprit of many ills. And I would acknowledge on Canada's behalf that nothing is perfect. That's why we're working on this agreement to make it better. And I would acknowledge, that some jobs were probably lost in Canada and perhaps elsewhere as a result of NAFTA. That's what happens when in any trade agreement, a trade zone, countries decide to do more certain things because they're really good at it, and they decide to maybe specialize in those things and let go of some other things. And it's businesses making those decisions usually, but the data is clear. And 25 years after the conclusion of NAFTA, we know that first of all, the main culprit of the disappearance of jobs, especially manufacturing jobs, is not NAFTA, is not trade, it's technology and it's automation. So that's point number one. Point number two, maybe, and it's true, some jobs were displaced because of NAFTA between the three countries. It's true. However, we know that NAFTA created far more jobs than it has displaced. And the number we have is 200,000 jobs annually, net new jobs, over and above what's been displaced, are created in the NAFTA countries. Why? Because we trade more with each other, we make more products and more services because we have bigger markets between ourselves, and that you need more people to create those services and those jobs and those products. So NAFTA has been beneficial overall in terms of job creation in all three of our countries, and we can't take it for granted. This is the time when we're getting to the crunch time now of finishing the negotiations, and we all need to be showing up at the table with our best ideas and a constructive mindset.
Agreed.
Yeah, exactly. I agree completely with what Stephane mentioned right now. It is very important that the business sector in Colorado and other entities that have a stake in trade and investments with Mexico and Canada let their voices here in Washington. I think it's very important what the World Trade Center Denver is doing with the Colorado Business Roundtable and all the institutions like Colorado Oil Consortium. But because, as it was mentioned, it has been taken for granted. No too many people started worrying about at the beginning of all this rhetoric that starts saying that we're going to eliminate NAFTA and we're going to go bilateral agreements. And other states have been very active. Texas, for instance, the governor of Texas sent a letter directly to President Trump saying, for Texas, is very important. So I think every state in the United States has a stake on it, and the voice should be heard.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today, you guys. Be sure to check out this podcast and this video at cobrt.com on our radio page tomorrow. Thank you so much. It's been a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.